Okay, testing. Hello, welcome everyone back to our OpenFOAM C++. Okay, so in the last video, we just got ourselves started on how to, work with classes. So today we want to do some something's chop. So we want to start doing things a little more advanced rather than just printing this vector here. Okay, the thing I want to do is to, first order of business is that I want to get all of this. I want to get the classes defined as if using this, as if I was doing this, call that, just like how we do our functions. We do our prototyping. Okay, we define our functions or prototype our functions first. Alright, we prototype our functions first. After that, we then want to do after that, then we want to do our we want to define all our functions over here. We want to define all the functions that are inside our object, or rather inside our class over here. So let's quickly get that done first before we move on to other things. So how do we do it? Well, you can see that the template is more or less what you see here. I can just type integer something, and I will put a semicolon after the brackets, no curly braces there. So I'll just have this int print vector, okay, and I will I will just say, this is with a semicolon at the back. That is it. Now what I need to do is to move to the back. Alright, so what I'm basically doing is to just define the function here, prototype the function here, and start writing all the code towards the back. Okay, so that the code is over here rather than over here. Okay, so how do I do that? You can take a look at the template I have over to the left. Okay, the template I have to the left over here, it will show one of the ways you can do it, or the other way you can of course look at it over here through this C++ example on w3schools.com. You just do the same thing. You have a class definition first, then you have a method or function defined outside the class. So how do you do it? You type the class type. In this case it's a void, in my case it's an integer. So my class method, or my class, then 2 colons here, and my method, and then you write whatever you need there. But make sure over here you don't have curly, you don't have what do you call that? You don't have a semicolon at the back. So what do I do? So let's see. What was the class name, or what's the function name? It's called print vector. So we can say print vector int. Okay. So first thing I need to type is the class name. Okay. So the function print vector is a subset of this class called vectors. So I need to define it as such: vector print vectors. So is it with an S or without S? Oh, it's without an S. So the vectors is with an S, the print vectors is without an S. Now I'll need to do brackets and braces here, and of course I'll need to have my return 0 at the back. Okay, and then of course I want to do some printing. Okay, so cout, we are starting to print our vectors, ... and then I'll just have an end line here. Alright, so hopefully it compiles okay. So it does compile okay. 1 1 1 1 1 1. Okay, so that's all. You see, it's very simple. Okay, it says here we are starting to print our vectors, and that is what you see on the youtube.c++. Alright, so again we just define our functions here, and then we have our what do you call that? We have this this class, no, this function over here, and it just prints something. Okay, so it's very simple to separate or to have a function defined outside. Okay, so we can do that. Alright, this is very useful, and we'll find that when OpenFOAM writes a C++ file, often they separate out the classes. The heading, this one is what you might call the heading part, and this part is what you might call, the main bulk of the code or the source part. So anyway, that will come a little bit more important later. Okay, so remember I was talking about public and private functions and variables. So this is a public function. Okay, now I want to introduce some private variables. Okay, because it's a good practice. Basically, it's a good practice to do something called encapsulation. So this is the one I'm talking about here, encapsulation. And in this example, the variable that's being encapsulated, so to speak, is this variable called salary. Okay, so this is put into the private access specifier. So if I were to translate it to this code, my vectors will be placed under the private specifier. So all my vector data will be stored here in this part of the class, and it will not be erased, not like a function. So what are the vectors I want? Okay, I want 2 position vectors. So let's do double. Okay, vector 1, and I put 3 and a 1. Okay, double vector 2, and I put 3 and 1. Okay, so that should be okay. Let me try and compile this code first to see whether there are any errors. Okay, so no errors there. Alright, I compile the code, it doesn't give me any errors, so that is fine. I have a vector 1 and vector 2 over here. Alright, so what can we do with this vector? Well, firstly, we can give it some initial values when we start. If not, if you try and print this vector, it will not do us any good. Okay, so which vector do we want to print? Okay, which vector do we want to print? We can just we can do it this way. I can do it this way. I can print vector 1. Okay, I can print vector 1. I can make that one of the functions here. And then I'll need to change the function over here to print vector 1. So let's print the vector here. So I will have a for loop. Alright, I'll have a for loop here. Alright, I'll have the for loop here, and what I do is to print out every single result of this vector. Alright, so let's delete all of this, and I'm going to do cout vector 1 I 0 and then end line. Okay, so what is this doing? That means for I going from 0 to 2. Okay, so this is what this for loop is doing. For I going from 0 to 2, you print out the elements of vector 1. Okay, so let me do it here. I'm not going to set initial values first, but just for demonstration. All right. All right. Let's see. Cout. What's it? Okay, I want to print vector 1, okay, element, okay, row, okay, so I'm going to print I, column 1, okay, 1 is dot dot dot, okay, and then end line. Okay, so what this is going to print is that for vector 1, row I, where I is going from 0 to 2, yeah, remember it starts from 0, so vector 1, column 0, 1 and 2, and then row 0, 1 and 2, and column 1, and then it will print out this number. Okay, so that's what print vector 1 does. We can do a similar thing for print vector 2. Okay, alright, so apparently I still need to change this bit of code, because when I call this function, okay, print vector, I need to specify that it's print vector 1 because I changed the name there. Alright, so that's just a small detail. So let's see whether we can do it. And a.out 1 1 1 1 1 1. So okay, so vector 1, all of this, if we don't initialize our variables properly, we will get random values of these kind of low numbers. Okay, so what we need, the proper way to do it, okay, if you don't want the numbers to be so random, is of course you need to initialize some values. Okay, you need to set vector 1 and vector 2 to vectors which are actually 0. Okay, how do we do that automatically? Okay, well, before that, let me just do the space here so that it will look nicer, because I realized there is no space between 1 and column here. So that's 1. Okay, let's see, 1 1 1 1 1 1. Okay, alright, so now the spacing problem is fixed. Now let me go and see if we can do some we can have a function that automatically initializes both vectors when we start. What is this function? What is this function called when we automatically just initialize it? All right. So this function is something called a constructor. A constructor is a function that is automatically called whenever you bring your class into your main file, or it will be automatically executed when you it will be automatically executed. Yeah, it will be automatically executed then when you actually start. Okay, when you start importing your vectors, or you make an object with your class. Okay, when you create your object, the function will automatically execute, and that is called a constructor. So let's give you an example of a constructor. Okay, so the constructor will do this. Okay, so I'm going to put constructor here. How do you define a constructor? A constructor is let's see. Do I have a constructor here? Set factor. No, I don't have a constructor here. But okay, let's go and Google constructor. C++. Oh, I think it should be here. Constructor. Yes, this one. Alright, constructors. Okay, so how do you define constructors? You basically define them as if they are a function. However, you don't see any void, int, main, or whatever. So you have to make sure the name of the function, or in this case the name of the constructor, is exactly the same as what you have in the class. I mean exactly the same name as your class. So the constructor, I name it, in this case it has to be called vector. Okay, So let's call vectors. Alright. So this is our constructor that will initialize our two vectors. So of course you'll still need your two brackets and your semicolon. Okay, two brackets and a semicolon. Okay, but you won't quite see the same thing here, but in your encapsulation you will see pretty much how it's supposed to be. Oh, that's not here. Class methods. Yes, it'll be something like this, except without the int. Okay, so int, you have your class, and then you have function, and then blah blah blah. Okay, so that's how you kind of define your function, and it's the same for constructors, except you don't have this int over here. Anyway, I should not have vectors here. That should be done later. Okay, so that should be done later. Yes. Anyway, so we can have vectors here. That will be the constructor. And conversely, if you want to execute a code that to have a piece of code that automatically executes every time you exit the program, we call that the destructor. So it's called a destructor. So you don't really and this is how you define it, yeah? You don't really construct or destruct anything, basically. I mean, by default, you don't construct or destruct anything. They are just functions. However, the name is there because usually we like to initialize our variables using the constructor and delete variables using the destructor. Okay, so this is why they have such a name there. But otherwise, they are just functions that execute at the start when you import the object, and at the end when you kind of delete the object. So we can sort of again define our constructor and destructor towards the bottom over here. So I can do it as follows: vectors. Okay, vectors. Okay, so then I'll do my two brackets and my curly braces. Alright, and what then do we have? We want to initialize the vector 1 to become 0. So how do we do that? Okay, so first thing, let's do this here. Okay, first thing I want to initialize vector 1 to be equals to a vector of zeros. Okay, 3, 1. Okay, something like that. So this is like MATLAB syntax, but I hope you understand. I want to have vector 1 being a full like vectors of zeros. Alright, so let's again do our for loop. So for int I equals to 0, semicolon I less than 3, and then semicolon again, and then I plus plus, and we'll have our curly braces again. So what do we want? We want vector 1, okay, vector 1 I 0 to be equals to 0, and also we want vector 2 to do the same thing. Okay, so let's see whether this works. Oh, I forgot to compile it. So again, I don't have there's an error there because it says an undefined reference to vectors, meaning to say I have not defined my destructor yet. So let's I have defined my constructor, but I have not defined my destructor. So let's me define the destructor and then recompile again. Then hopefully it won't give that same error. Vectors. Okay, so double semicolon. and vectors again with that squiggly thing or tilde. Okay, so I'll just do a simple cout end of object destructor running. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And of course I can of course print cout. Well, what we are doing here is we are initializing the vector, and then I can put dot dot dot, and then I just give it an end line, and that's it. Let's do a G++ again, and it should run okay. So 1 1 1 1 1 1. So you can see that the vector 1, the vector 1 is actually what do you call that? Vector 1 is now properly 0 0 0. So that's what a constructor does. Okay, so from this we can see that if we have a private what do you call that, variable here, we can use functions in the public access specifier or the public area to actually manipulate, or rather deal with this variables over here, because we cannot because if we try to get, let's say, a value of this vector 1 and 2 directly, we will not be able to. So let me show you what I mean before I finish this video off. Vec, okay, let's say double A, and I want to say A is equals to vector 1, okay, 3 1, okay, or maybe 1 0, 1 and 0, and likely it will give me an error because vector 1 is actually declared private, so I cannot access this variable. So what we need to do is the sort of roundabout way, okay, is to define a function in the public sector, the public access specifier, to sort of either get the value of these vectors here, or set the value of these vectors here. So that's how we usually play around with the classes and objects. So I'll stop for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.